Welcome to Unlock Wayne County, the podcast that holds the keys to unlocking your appreciation for local history and happenings around Wayne County, New York. And now, from the Museum of Wayne County History in Lyons, New York, is our host, Deb Hall.
Greetings, I am Deb Hall, Director of the Wayne County Historical Society, as well as General Manager of the Museum of Wayne County History here in Lyons, New York, the county seat. Our primary mission here at the museum and the Wayne County Historical Society is dedicated to inspiring an appreciation for the diverse history of Wayne County. Through the collection, preservation, and promotion of historical artifacts, stories, and landmarks, we aim to educate and engage residents and visitors alike, fostering a deeper connection of our shared heritage. My goal today is to bring you a variety of fascinating stories and insights into the people, places, businesses, and events that have shaped our county. This journey is to unlock Wayne County and is made possible through conversations with incredible individuals in our community, those who are passionate about their topics of research and who are willing to share their knowledge with all of us. Whether it's from early American history to today's current events, join me as we unlock the mysteries of history today on Unlock Wayne County. And today I'm talking with Bob Stopper of Lyons, New York. He's a retired teacher, an avid boaterman and fisherman, and a renowned canal promoter and aficionado of, I say, all things canal. He is also the inspiration behind the Lyons Canal Greeters volunteer group and has played a crucial role sort of behind the scenes of tourist developments along the Erie Canal. Hi, Bob.
Hello, Deb. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for coming out. Took us a while to get together, but here we are.
Yes.
All right, so we're going to have just a conversation about who you are and how you came to be a canal aficionado. Can you give me some background? What's your history? Did you grow up here?
No, I did not grow up here. I was born in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, on a farm. Never spent much time in a boat until I came up here to New York in 1966 to become a teacher at Newark. I spent the next 34 years teaching English and public speaking at Newark Senior High School. And along with that, I spent 16 years as an adjunct teacher at Finger Lakes Community College. Along the way, I spent a lot of hours on the Erie Canal, Seneca Lake, Lake Ontario, fishing, but I was especially interested in what was happening along the Erie Canal. And because I was a farm boy and because we were poor, we saved everything. And that's what intrigued me about the Erie Canal. Every place I went, I saw all this old stuff, and all the people working for the canal would say, we can't throw it away. We might need it another day. We might need it tomorrow. And they don't make this stuff anymore. So that really got me involved in what was happening on the canal.
Neat. All right, so you were a teacher in Newark and your family was here. So you raised a family here in Wayne County?
Yes, yes. My wife was a teacher in Clyde, and we have two daughters. One is an athletic trainer and chiropractic sports doctor, and the other one is a instrumental music teacher down in Comac, Long Island, and we have three grandchildren.
Awesome.
And I'm happy to say that my entire family was very outdoor oriented.
Well, so you sort of grew to love the canal when you came into the region. You didn't have much information about it beforehand, and so you started boating along the canal and fishing along the canal and meeting people along the canal. And as part of that, then you also started collecting things, saving everything, so to speak, as these folks were apt to do because of the...
Well, I was intrigued. I like to take a lot of pictures, too, of things, and I was intrigued by the way things were made. So I became good friends with some of the people who worked up here at the dry dock on the canal, and they would invite me in and show me how they were doing the fabrication and the welding and things like this. And one thing led to another, and I became extremely interested in what was happening. And then when I retired from teaching in the year 2000, shortly after that, a gentleman by the name of John Callahan, who was the deputy commissioner for the canal at the time, called me and said, we know you have a great interest in the Erie Canal. Could we entice you to take some pictures and maybe do some promotion for us? We can't pay you, but we can certainly make it worth your while to go places where maybe some people can't go. And that's what got me started.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So a special invitation to
Yes.
go out. And so your first set of pictures, what was it? Was it the old Erie Canal route? What did you focus on?
My first set of pictures was a boat that had sunk
Oh.
along the canal between Newark and Lyons. And it was in the bulrushes and a little bit of everything. In fact, I still have the picture. But I was not as intrigued by the boat as much as I was, how did it get there and what happened along the way? And I found out that it just died out and nobody did anything with it. And when it became bad enough, they pulled it away and used it for scrap.
Well, so you got an invitation to go out and take pictures, and then they use these pictures for promotion. And
Well, they didn't really use it for promotion. It's just that I would tell them as I went out once in a while, I think there's a problem here, maybe a problem over there, maybe. And because I was retired, I had a little extra time to go and notice things like trees that had blown over into the canal. So when I was coming through, I might give them a call and say, no big danger, but you really ought to remove this as soon as you can. And that's how we got into it very well.
and so you and your wife would do this together.
Yeah, most of the time.
And so you developed a relationship with the folks at the dry dock.
Excellent to this very day.
That's great. And these are the men and women who work the canal system every day.
Not only every day, but even in the wintertime at nights, many of them are out there scraping the rust off of the railings, and they work 24/7, many of them.
I think that's one of the things that we don't realize, especially folks here in Wayne County. We have the canal. We've got how many miles? 30 miles or
Yes.
so of the canal in our county. And I pass it and I drive along it every day. I drive from Macedon to Lyons every day to work. And I cross over the canal at least twice. And I sort of take it for granted.
Yes.
And you don't realize how many people are working on it and how important it is still to, state infrastructure.
And they don't stop just because it rains. That's actually when they got to get to work quite frequently for flood control, things like this that are very important for the area.
This love of history, sort of, and the love of the canal and the infrastructure and the photography and everything. How did that lead you to focusing on Lyons? I mean, you lived here in Lyons, but did you see a need for some kind of program that would entice people to come? I mean, you sort of were asked to do promotional pictures, but you kind of took that to the next level, didn't you?
For several years, I wrote about the canal and aspects of it in Wayne County Life, which was a blog, which is no longer, I don't think it's active anymore. And once in a while, I would submit articles, and the Finger Lakes Times was very gracious in accepting them. And it just helped promote the whole area. It really did. And I know that it brought some visitors here, not only by boat, but by land too. And I think that's one of the things we have a tendency to think of when we think of canal, we think of just the water. But there are a lot of hikers, bikers, and auto tourists, as I call them, who come here and they're here and they're gone, and we frequently don't even know about it. But where they go, they say what they saw, and that's important.
And so you mentioned, land and water. And so primarily land visitors, well, they can come by car, but they're also coming on the old towpath.
Yes.
So 20 years ago, when you first started, was there an Erie Canal trail all the way through the county?
No, the trail through the county, especially from Lyons to Clyde, was just finished in the last couple of years. No, in fact, 20 years ago, there were spots where you couldn't even get close to the canal unless you were a fisherman. There's no way you could take a bike or anything like that, especially in the Palmyra, Newark area. They developed that quite a bit ahead of this section. But part of the problem was initially, when they were thinking of putting a canal trail through, it was before we had all the problems with invasive species and a lot of things like this.
Okay.
And that made a big difference in the later plans that we have for today.
So were you part of that?
Only to take pictures. And we had a mayor here, her name was Corrine Kleisley, and she was always very interested in what's going on out there, and very appreciative, very good. And so it was nice to take some pictures and take them in and tell her what was going on.
Well, and so the Canal Corp, they also must have gotten copies of your photos and some of this promotional stuff. And so 20 years ago, how much activity was really being focused on the canal for tourism use. Was it sort of new?
Yes, tourism was new. Not only was tourism new, but there was a downside happening. They had lost the commerce. An awful lot of commerce had disappeared. And until the Canal Corporation and Parks and Trails and the Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor became involved and started to push this, we were really going downhill. And it was unusual to see many boats at all. It's hard to believe that 100 years ago they thought, in fact, we have it in print where they had 100 boats waiting in line at the lock here in Lyons. And today, some days, we don't even have one boat. Then you might have 10 on a weekend, but
Yeah.
it has really changed an awful lot.
Well, the transportation of goods is really what changed the
Yes.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to not only sort of capture the development over the last 20 years, but then you did become part of it. And this attention on Lyons was, I would say, what would you call it? A sort of solidified when you started this Canal Greeters group?
Well, the canal greeters are a little bit different, and that started out of a situation where somebody was desperate. A gentleman by the name of Jack McCrannles, who, if you live in the village, you would know him, and we were standing down at what we call the dock area today, and this sailboat came through, and the lady hollered at us and asked us where Lyons, New York is. And we both started laughing and said, you're right here. And in uncertain terms, she told us that we weren't telling her the truth because her map did not show Lyons where we were telling her was. And actually, Lyons is still listed on some of the old maps up at the next lock, 28A, which is a mile and a half away from here. So we were really telling her the truth. As it turned out, she and her husband came in and we helped them dock, and she was a little bit concerned at the time, so we tried to help her out. And she said, "So, what do you have here?" "Well, what do you mean?" "Well, don't you have a map or something? Where should we go?" That was the true beginning of the Lyons Erie Canalway Greeters. So Jack and we talked about it, and we said we've got to really do something. We came up to the, believe it or not, the Main Street office where a gentleman by the name of Jerry Ashley was working, and we said we need a map. Right on the spot, we took a map from Google and we took it down and we put it on a piece of plywood, and that was the beginning.
That was the first sign.
All it was a Google map, and that was in the year 2010, actually 2010. And we put that up, and in that year we had the formal dedication of the dock. We had some wonderful people stop here.
The Lyons Canal Greeters Volunteer Group. Can you talk a little bit about where you're at today with them?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It's something that Lyons is actually known for, and known for not only in the States, but I would say in Europe too. Our group, it's all senior citizens. I think everybody who is a member of the organization belongs to at least 3 civic organizations here in town or in the community. Some of them are church related, makes no difference. They're people who are really interested in their community. And we meet and greet the boaters if we can. We have no assigned tasks, but someone is assigned to each evening, anywhere from 4 o'clock on to hopefully go down and say hello, meet and greet. And we have our own little packets, I guess you could say. Some of us are into boating, some are into golf, some are into history. So everyone has their own little shtick that they take with them. And that in turn has led into a beautiful camaraderie. We call it worldwide camaraderie, to the point that we have people as recently as last summer who might be coming from Michigan, who might be coming from Florida, who tell us, "We're going to be in Lyons at this particular time. I'd like to see so-and-so, hope so-and-so is here." And the group that we have really tied in with are the American Great Loop Cruising Association people, the Loopers. And we know 4 or 5 of them when they're planning to be here in Lyons already this summer. And right now they're in Florida.
Yeah,
but they've called and told us they're going to be here. So the greeters, God bless them, they give up a lot of time, and it's usually mealtime in the evening. And before the lock hours changed from 10 o'clock in the evening, our greeters were still meeting boaters coming in, sometimes in the dark, sometimes in terrible thunderstorms. We would go down and help them out. And they're very, 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 very appreciative. They really are.
But the idea is that if you're a boater on the canal or in the canal system and you're traveling along and a lock is closed, you have to dock for the night. You have to wait until that lock closes opens the next morning.
Yeah.
And so boaters are looking for places to stop.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned earlier about the plight of the first, visitors here, not that they were the first, but they were looking for Lyons, but they were looking for some amenities.
Yes.
And so the volunteer group really instituted the awareness to the town that these people are coming in from out of town and need a place to stay, need a place to eat, maybe need some amenities, right?
Yep.
And so that has grown over the years. Not only are you down there chatting with these folks and learning about them, and but also cyclists come in and you're talking with them. You've got historic signs that are now lining the canal trail down there that talk about some of the history of Lyons. And explain to our listeners what a looper is so that they can get the concept of where these people are coming from.
A looper is a family or maybe two boaters, or in some cases one boater, who travels a huge loop, and I'm going to try to explain it this way, which might start in Florida. Then they come up the intercoastal waterway. They go out into the Atlantic Ocean for a few miles, 50, 60, it depends what boat they're with. They come in on the Hudson River. They come all the way up to Waterford. Then, for our sake, hopefully they come west instead of going up into Lake Champlain. They follow the Erie Canal. Then they come all the way through Lyons, New York. And if you look at the map, we aren't even as big as a pinhead on that big map that they're following. They go out Lake Erie, Lake Superior, Chicago, the Mississippi River, Tom Higbee Waterway, keep on going, go in at the Gulf of Mexico, go in across the bottom and end up back in Florida. It's about 6,000 miles, and some people do it all at one time, and that's usually 12 to 14 months, and other people do it in splits. And we're seeing a little bit more of that now because some people, because of COVID, some people retired early, and some people have found out that they can do a lot of their computer work on the boat. So why be at home? These people are just wonderful people to talk with. And in fact, we have a looper who will be, it's referred to as the American Great Loop Cruising Association. It has a huge membership. And we have one person and his wife who is coming through this summer, and it will be trip number 35 that they have done this 6,000-mile journey. They have lived on the boat for 35 years. It's the same boat, and they are just the nicest people that you would ever meet. And I think that all the greeters would say that these boaters, they really have stories to tell. But one thing about them is until you talk to them, and I'm lucky because I talk to a lot of them in the morning, that's when you find out who they really are. I mean, we've had baseball stars, we've had all kinds of people. They're just wonderful to meet. And I would say with the loopers, some of them go through the Erie Canal, or they have gone through the Erie Canal maybe 5 or 10 years ago. And now when they're coming back, they're talking about, oh my God, it doesn't even seem like the same place. Because even right here in Lyons, Newark, Clyde, the communities have built up so much more on the waterway. And in addition to that, now instead of doing the quick trip, they're stopping in each of the villages and seeing what's there. And they don't buy hamburger, they buy T-bone steak for their meal. They are just wonderful people.
Yeah, well, they're looking for the experience.
Yeah.
And so I think the interesting thing again is that, we take it for granted, us residents maybe. I travel the canal route, if you will, Route 31 parallels the canal all the way from Macedon to Lyons every day, and you cross over it, you take for granted these one-lane bridges and things like that. But folks coming from other parts of the country, this is a unique waterway.
Yes.
And we mentioned earlier that we're celebrating 200 years of the Erie Canal. The museum is doing a special exhibit for the 200th, but the state is planning a huge celebration all along the canal, as well as different communities. But if we can, for just a minute, if we could talk history. So the Erie Canal is 200 years old. And I think one of the things that we don't always understand about this type of infrastructure project is what it took to make it happen in the first place. And so if we go back 200 years and we talk about the path of the Erie Canal in Wayne County in particular, one of the things that you've pointed out is the divergence of the Erie Canal, the original Erie Canal, which was known as Clinton's Ditch.
Yes.
And then the second canal, which is the enlargement. And then the third canal, which is what we have today, the Barge Canal. Can you talk a little bit about, your understanding of just brief history of how the canal came to be and why these three different paths? Because we have really big pieces of infrastructure that are sort of the artifacts of the original canal.
Well, I think we can base the path of the canals on engineering and needs of the time. And so when they were trying to come through from Seneca River into Wayne County and beyond, there really was not much they could do because they were working with simple instruments. They had a shovel, a pick. It was all hand labor. They could use a mule once in a while if the mule could get through the muck and the mire, but everything else was done by hand. So the first canal, which is frequently referred to as Clinton's Ditch, also is referred to as a contour canal. And what that means is as they were digging the ditch, they tried to follow the path of least resistance. And that's what happened, especially in the Savannah area, the Clyde area here for this area of the state, of the county. They were following the path of least resistance. And in addition to that, we have to understand that these were, as we refer to them, mosquito times and health times. And so you had some people who were working for a bigger group, a gentleman. I like to think of it in terms of like the union of today. Some guy might have 10 or 12 people working for him. But then you might also have a farmer who had a little bit of political input, and he might say, you bring the canal over here through my farm, I'll use my guys and we'll dig it. And so it might be a little bit crooked compared to what the original plans were, but that's the way they did it anyhow. So the first canal that came through, especially on the eastern part here, it came into a place called Meadville, which is no longer really a town. Mudlock, you can go over there and find a little cemetery, but it's, as far as a village, it's no longer the village that it once was.
But that's in the direction or in the vicinity of Clyde.
Yeah, beyond Clyde, east of Clyde. And then as it came through, if you look at the old topo maps, you can see that it came through Clyde, came through Loch Berlin, as we know Loch Berlin today, came into Lyons, and we know that the canal was, 2.5 miles north of what it is today as it came through Lyons. That was primarily because of the hand labor that they were using. The second canal shortened down a little bit. It didn't follow these little ravines and streams wherever they went, because when the second canal was built, now they started to have machinery. They had steam, and they also had some other engines that they could use at that particular time. Plus, we had something else that happened, and that is midway through the second canal, we had the introduction of dynamite.
That made things a little
easier. And that's
easier.
why they used the word, for the second canal, they used the word enlarged or improved. So the second canal was wider and deeper. And instead of going around the corner of a field or the corner of a woods, they went right through it now. And that really cut down some mileage along the way for the people. But at the same time, because they were able to do this, they bypassed places like Loch Berlin and some other communities along the way. When the third canal came, now we really had machinery with the big dredges. Diesel, it wasn't diesel, but it was more steam, and they had electric that they were using at this time. And coming through, especially on the eastern section, they used a lot of the original Clyde River. And that's why they come up with the term canalized. So they took whatever was there and made it into a canal. And interestingly is the fact that here in Lyons, the original route for the third canal was not where it is today. The original route for the third canal was basically to come in where the old Parker building is, which would be outside of town, and it would have come in up almost in the area where the dry dock is. But they figured to get around the railroad tracks and to go over what we call Route 14 today, they would have had an embankment of 17 feet high.
Yeah.
The other thing that happened was a gentleman by the name of Bashford, who owned the cider press and vinegar factory. He was also the treasurer for the county, very influential in state politics. He's the guy who really put persuasion on and said, follow the river. And that's what brought it through here. Now, that adds another dimension because that lock 27, is inside the village.
Yes, you mentioned that.
Along with that, I should add probably right now that when boats come through today, when boats come through on the barge canal, once in a while, a boater will say, I've got to find a tech shop. What do you need? Well, he said, my GPS or my Garmin or Chot plot or whatever, it hasn't been working and I've got to get it fixed. There's a reason for it. The end of the Clyde River, or the beginning, depends which way you're going, is right here at Lock 27. Once you go west on Lock 27, that's really a brand new ditch. The Army Corps of Engineers have never really surveyed from Lock 27 on.
Towards Newark.
Towards Newark. For the boats, when you look at their, what I will call a Garmin, there are other words for it, all they have is gray matter. It shows where they are, that they're going through in the canal. But as soon as they come through the lock, then they get the Army Corps of Engineer maps pop up on their screen, and they can see where all the logs and the inclines and the grass and everything is. And it's really fascinating to see this happen. It's just part of what happens in the area. And if you know this, and our greeters know these things, so they're able to help them out, tell them, don't worry about it, it will work fine.
Well, again, it's sort of like when you're traveling down the canal, and you must, hear this from some of your boaters. You're really traveling back in history. You really look at your surroundings and think about a rope towing a boat with a mule on land. Just the lock mechanisms in and of themselves, I mean, they're massive. You don't get a sense of it until you're going through
And it was all done by hand, and that's what makes it even more intriguing.
Yeah.
And so for the people who were working on the boats, you always had the tiller, the guy in the back, but then you had your hoagies, and sometimes 2 and 3 of those, because it was a lot of work moving those gates. And sometimes it would take you 6, 8 hours, depending on traffic and depending on water flow, depending on the yuck that's coming through into your lock from a farm up the road.
You mentioned the hoagies and the mules and the towpath, and I had a question. When was the last time that the towpath was officially used, but the time frame where they sort of using the towpath and a rope fell out of favor to, I'm assuming, a steam engine on a boat?
That's kind of easy to pick out. In 1918, the barge canal of today was opened up. The previous canal, the second canal, was last used in 1917. That's when they were still using, they had a little bit of steam power, but that's when they were using the rope tows and the mules. The barge canal was built and it didn't have the 10-foot wide towpath or rope tow area. And actually that caused a huge problem when the barge canal was built. All of a sudden, what are we going to do with all these boats that don't have any motors? And it really, if you read about it in the papers from that time, it was a huge concern for people because they not only did not have, we can call it horsepower, they didn't have engines. They had some small tugs. So that led into another whole breed of if a guy had a tug, could he pull 2, 3, 4 of these boats that used to be pulled one at a time by a mule? So that's where you get the song 15 miles in the Erie Canal, and it's a reminiscent song a little bit about we've done this and we can't do it anymore. But that's a neat question.
Well, and it makes me think about the trail along the canal as well. And the trail itself was, in most cases, the old towpath.
Yes.
But there are areas now where the towpath does not traverse the side of the canal. And it's for this reason, because the canal route changed in the early 1900s and they didn't have a towpath.
And then you have a lot of other developments that took place even here in Lyons with Abbey Park. That was around 1976 when that was made, but that was just a big ditch and trees growing there. But even today, from Abbey Park, basically down to the lock, you kind of have to squirm to get through the trees and things there because there's not really a towpath in that area.
Can you also enlighten us a little bit, we talk about this big piece of infrastructure, but do you have some insight on any of the local, what I call notable, people from Wayne County who helped, in 1825?
Yes and no. If you go way back to the original people, I like to think of Jesse Hawley, who's the guy who got put in jail and wrote this story. I mean, he only lived 20 miles from us here in Geneva initially, and this story that he wrote became this big throughway that we have of today. But as far as the local people, probably the one that would stand out in my mind the most would be Richmond, who developed and was the engineer for the Richmond Aqueduct.
That's right.
That which was the second Erie Canal. And of course, he jumped ship literally, went with the railroad
That's
after
right.
that. And another person would be Myron Holly. Myron Holly did actually live here in Lyons. He lived in Palmyra for a while also. But Myron Holly was like a supervisor for the area. And something happened in the books. And he actually sold his house to pay the people who were working there. Supposedly the money was taken or it was not properly marked into the right places.
For the contracts that were
Yeah.
let on the canal
Yeah.
construction here in Wayne County.
Yeah, so those two would, from the days long ago, they would be the ones that would stand out in my mind. If we took the Bashford family, now we're going back to the second canal and the end of the first canal. The Bashfords, they owned what was the cider vinegar plant, and they also owned a lot of the property along the canal bank when the first canal was there. So that family was very instrumental in keeping the canal actually here where it was supposed to be in Lyons itself. And the other family, it's not a family as such, but the Ennis family, the brothers and everybody, were very involved. They lived out in Alloway, and they were great construction people, and they actually did the chief work for the aqueduct, Medina Aqueduct. The Ennis people were very involved as masons. Our Lyons Erie Canalway greeters, we sometimes take people on what we refer to as land tours. So we take them and show them where the peppermint used to grow. We show them the old post office. We show them the old mule barn over at Loch Berlin. Then we bring them back and we show them what we refer to sometimes as the beet factory. And in the New York Times in 1900, right next to the Erie Canal here in Lyons, New York, on the front page is a picture of this building that still stands. And it was considered the most modern factory on the East Coast. And they made beet sugar. And it was eventually used then for carrots and things like that. That was considered number one. Come up the street here a little bit further and you go up to the cider vinegar plant. And that 2 years later was listed as the number one volume manufacturer of pickle juice and cider vinegar. They both shipped on the second Erie Canal. Second Erie Canal went, they went too.
Oh,
They
wow.
went too. So we had a lot of great stuff.
Interesting businesses and impact.
Yeah.
It really impacted the rest of the county as well. All right, I'm here with Bob Stopper, Lyons, New York Canal aficionado, talking about the 200th anniversary of the Erie Canal, this year being celebrated not only locally, but also across the state and really across the world. But the impact that this piece of inland waterway infrastructure had on New York State was phenomenal. At the time in 1825, it really changed the nature of not only our local towns and villages with population growth, but it certainly changed and had a huge impact on the growth of the country. And our new nation took advantage of this piece of infrastructure that New York State built all on its own dime. And so, Bob, if you could, talk to us a little bit about what you've discovered in your studies and research of this piece of infrastructure. It sounds like you're kind of fascinated with the infrastructure piece of it too, that it was this man-made marvel. Talk a little bit about the impact that it had on the people of the day.
Well, I think when they started the canal, everybody thought it was kind of silly, and that's why they called it Clinton's Folly. But when the canal was finished, they had a total different word that they used for it at that time, and they referred to it as the first superhighway of the United States. And part of the reason for that was because, first of all, it had a huge impact on what I'm going to call people movement. With the advent of the new canal, people were able to travel a lot easier than they did before the opening of the canal, because before the canal was opened, if you went from Buffalo to Albany by stagecoach, it would take you 2 weeks. Now you could get on a canal boat and you could be there in 5 days. But in that 5 days on the canal boat, you could also leisurely rest for the evening. You could eat if you wanted to. You could sit on top of the boat and enjoy the scenery. And in the stagecoach, you kind of hung on to the stagecoach and hoped that nothing happened and that a wheel did not fall off. So that's the moving of the people. But the moving of tonnage or of grain is even more impressive, because if you were to ship a ton of wheat from the Genesee Valley or from Buffalo on land, it would cost you a minimum $100 a ton. On the canal, the new price was $5 a ton.
Oh,
And
man.
it was just nuts. People just could not believe it, but they could do it. So when we look at some of the people moving, that's one thing. But if we look at the exchange of goods coming from the west as opposed to the east, if materials were moving from, let's say, the Buffalo or the Great Lakes, it was usually agricultural, or it was wheat, whiskey, lumber, gravel, and stones. That's what the boats carried going from Buffalo to Albany. If they were coming from Albany, it was really quite a bit different. Manufactured products, including clothing, cooking utensils, and hardware, which they referred to as nails and building supplies. And the one that people frequently do not mention, when you went from Albany west, you frequently had a lot of packet boats, and they had new people, immigrants, who were going to go west and find their fortune. So a lot of people moved out of necessity or to try to find a new life, and others were moving just for a job. But it really changed people movement. But I think it's more important when you think about moving the people, because they always had to stop at a lock, any community that they went through. And the locks were the fun places of the community. So the community would go down to the locks and see these people, see how they were dressed, see how they spoke, see what was going on. So now you're getting a new vision of society or of the rest of the world. But not only that, a whole generation and a whole genre of books and literature was developed. You had the vocabulary of the canalers. You had the vocabulary of people who were speaking broken English because they were from Europe, many of these people. It was just a whole new area. And in addition to that, it led to a lot of new literature of folk stories and also music. And people don't think about the music impact a lot of times, but you did have a lot of music. They had their own musical instruments on the boats, but also the guys who were working on the boats. And at the weekend, when they got to communities, they wanted to have a little good time. So when you have songs like Buffalo Girls, Won't You Come Out Tonight, and a few other songs like that, this really carried on into another whole genre just because the doggone canal was built.
Yeah.
And the lock was built. Had that not happened, you can't say for sure, but chances are pretty good we would not be sitting here today. And chances are very good that a whole genre, a whole wealth of storytelling and music and really understanding people, science, and people with different ideas how to take care of nature, how to do the bumblebees and things like that. These people knew from Europe, and it went back and forth. So that really was a huge impact in that particular time. So it was usage. Today, the canal is more pleasure craft, but it still is, and people should remember it, and they frequently don't. It is used to an extensive amount for flood control, especially here from Lyons East, and it's used in the West for irrigation. We would have a tough time. A lot of places would have a tough time if we could not control the water at the canal.
Interesting.
So
And that's really, that lends itself to talking about the management of the waterway. I mean, we're talking about the amount of people that came in, the impact it had on society and culture. And that's sort of a secondary to the fact that this was water traveling in a man-made ditch that needed to be managed every year. And so there was a team of engineers and surveyors and craftsmen, it sounds like, who were building boats and tending the locks and fixing broken things. And so here in Wayne County, really, we have the only facility in this region called a dry docks,
Yeah.
right? Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about the dry dock facility here?
Yeah, well, the dry dock here in Lyons, as I understand it, started around 1953, actually before that a little bit, but it really is a docking area that is dry. So if you can think of putting your boat up on, we would call them working horses, or putting them up on benches, that's what the dry dock looks like with a boat inside. There's no water underneath it at all. And that's necessary for maintenance, but it's also necessary when, like the Colonial Bell is here, they do what they call soundings. They go around and check the metal. You can't do it when it's in the water. They need to go around and make sure there are no holes coming through. So this dry dock here in Lyons is a very active, very working dry dock outside, taking care of the boats, but also at the dry dock here in Lyons, we have the facilities. It's to take care of other things that need to be done. And that's a craft in itself, kind of lost. The originals were made 200 years ago on these locks, and there's no factory around that makes something like that. So you need to manufacture it locally. And it's quite a craft. And I personally have had the luxury of watching them make the miter gates for the locks. These are 24, 26, 28-foot logs, 2.5 feet wide, and how they slice them and how they bend them, how they heat the wood or steam the wood to make bends. It's just phenomenal. And it has to be done correctly, because if you think about it, if the lock is not put in place correctly, it's not going to close, or it's going to go the other way. It's going to open up when you don't want it to.
Yeah.
So it's very time consuming, but I think all the guys who work for the dry dock, actually, I think all the people who work for the locks, they have a lot of pride in their work. They really do.
So the lock tenders, there's still a lock tender at every lock, obviously.
Yes.
And these are Canal Corporation employees.
Yes.
And yeah, keeping it beautiful, at least welcoming, being friendly. And we talked earlier about the timing of when locks are open and closed.
Yeah.
And it all lends itself to the tourist industry.
Yes.
And so this year, in honor of the 200th anniversary of the canal is opening a little early and staying open a little late, is my understanding.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure it opens up May 16th is the date that I found. The state will start their celebration, and then it closes in November, a little later in November.
Yes.
But what's happening this year is that New York State is asking communities to sponsor events all along the canal to celebrate the 200th. We have some banners here, and the museum is going to be doing an exhibit in our main exhibit room of all the canal artifacts that we have. We've got tons of pictures, especially from the enlargement and the barge canal enlargement era. We've got pictures, we've got artwork, we've got maps, we've got lots of studies, we've got some old books.
Wheelbarrow.
We got a wheelbarrow, that's
lights,
right.
Lots of lights.
Yep, a couple of buoy markers, that kind of stuff. So we're going to be setting up in here, but there's other events that are taking place in other communities. So if people are interested in that, the best place is probably the Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor for lists of events. And of course, WayneCountyTourism.com has other events that they're going to be listing. The first one that I'm going to mention is Cycle the Erie in July. Hundreds of cyclists come through on the Erie Canal Trail and cycle from Buffalo to Albany in that direction, right?
Yep.
And that's taking place in July. And you often have greeters who are down on the canal and either giving out water or talking about the history. And so this is sometimes a watering spot for some of the cyclists that come through. And then in August, we are going to co-sponsor a boat tour. The Wayne County Erie Canal Bicentennial Boat Tours are going to be taking place with Stivers Marina and Finger Lakes Water Adventures as our partner. And you're going to be our guest navigator, so to speak, our narrator on these. So we've got 7 trips that are coming up. Can you tell listeners a little bit about what they're going to see and what they're going to hear on some of these trips?
We have 7 trips. 4 of them are about 5 hours long, and the other 3 are about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. The long trips are either from Stivers Seneca Marina at Seneca Lake to Lyons. And if you want to take the same trip another day to get the boat back, you can do that. And the other long trip is from Clyde to Erie Canalway Adventures up in Macedon. Both of those trips are about 30 miles long, those two long ones. Along the way, you will really see history. If you are coming from Stivers Marina, you will go through 6 locks, you will go through 2 canals, you will go through the Montezuma Wildlife Refuge. You will also have the opportunity to stop. And when I say stop, I really mean that. We stop in front of probably the most photographed spot on the Erie Canal in our area, which is the Richmond Aqueduct. And that's 9 arches that are still there from the second Erie Canal. We go another 5 minutes and we show you the remains from the Slackwater Aqueduct, is what it's called, of the first Erie Canal. And then we turn right around and we come into the third canal. So you really get history here. Then we come up through Clyde and we see a lot of the historical things there. We pass underneath the lowest bridge in this section of the state, usually stop so you can take a picture. Kind of a neat area. And then we come all the way through and we see all the industry as we approach Lyons itself, and then we stop here in Lyons. So we take that trip back. If you want to take the long trip on either Friday or Sunday, that would be from Clyde, New York to Macedon. And that would take you through, again, 6 locks, 30 miles, and it would take you through Clyde, Lyons, Newark, Palmyra, and Macedon. And we're hoping that when we get to Macedon, if there is a boat that hasn't been rented out, the owner has said he would be glad to let people see the Erie Canal boats that are rented out up there. And along the way, I do the narrating. I'm proud to say this will be year number 8 for me. We have a nice handout, but we also point out things that are, I call it over the bank. So you might not know that this is where the old canal came in, and we point that out. You might not know what that building is sitting up on the side, but we point that out. You might not know that the waterway that comes in here in Lock 27 is really the Canandaigua outlet, and it's used for whitewater rafting. So we point out a lot of things along the line.
Neat.
And we've been told in the past, people have really appreciated the history. On the long trips, for those who are interested on the long trips, you do get, there's a cash bar, there's also lavatory, and you do get a bag lunch along the way.
Yeah.
And you get bus, so the bus tour is included in this too.
Yep, that's right. So the canal trips are one way. Park the car at the destination. They park the car there. They get on a bus, and the bus takes them to the origin
Yep.
of the boat trip. Then they get on the boat and take the boat ride back to their vehicle where it's parked.
And once people understand that, they love it. It's so simple because when you get off of a 5-hour boat trip, it might be 4 hours, but the reason that we make sure we try to cover the time is because sometimes the lock just doesn't work the way you would like it to, or you get some boats that are really slow. And there are some places in the canal you just simply cannot pass another boat. So you're behind them for maybe an hour, and you toot the horn and they toot back to you because they think you want to take a picture or something. No, that's not.
Well, that's all part of the leisurely ride down the Erie Canal.
Yeah.
And so then in September, is it International Canal Conference
Yes.
is taking place in Buffalo?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what they're going to be doing and launching there at Buffalo?
It's the International World Canal Conference in Buffalo, and there will be boats there from around the world. We've had them when the last conference was held in 2010. We actually had a lot of I'm going to say old-fashioned antique wooden boats, which actually docked here in Lyons, probably a dozen of them, because they were going to the conference. So I'm anticipating the same thing will happen again this year, although it's a little bit late in the season. And we know once you hit October around here, the weather changes. Could be snow, could be ice. And so some people are concerned about that. But they will be taking some tours during the day. I don't think they're coming down to the dry dock, but they are going to all canal-related places in the area. And then at the end of the conference, a boat which has been recreated by the Buffalo Maritime Center, referred to as the Seneca Chief, that will be doing and replicating the original voyage that was done by the governor on the Seneca Chief the first official trip down the Erie Canal. And in Wayne County, this year they are stopping in Newark and Lyons. Next summer, when they come back, they will be stopping in the remaining communities. And the idea is that this boat has been recreated 100% with volunteers. Of course, they have money that has been donated to them, but all the work has been done by volunteers. And in addition to bringing the boat, they also are bringing displays for each community. They are hoping to plant a white pine tree in honor of the Indians and people who lived when the canal came through and pushed them out of the way. And then they are going to have a few games for kids and a lot of souvenirs. And actually, to be as authentic as they possibly can be, so far, when they did the trip last summer, they slept on the boat just the way the people did in the early days, 200 years ago. And that's what they're kind of doing now. To answer the question, is it going to be pulled by a mule? No. And part of the reason is there is no mule trail. I think I mentioned this earlier, along this canal. And if the bike trail is not next to the canal, it's very difficult to get there. And if you can get close to the canal, some places the bank is just so steep, you don't want to.
The Seneca Chief replica boat is not powered by a motor.
No.
So there'll be a
tugboat
that'll be helping it move along. And this boat will be docking in Newark.
Yes.
On September 30th. And then again here in Lyons on October 1st.
Yeah.
And the public will be able to tour the boat. And so they're using this boat as kind of a floating museum of what it was like, life on the canal. The boat will be opened up for a couple hours in the afternoons of those days when they are docked. And people will be able to get on the boat and walk through and ask questions. And they're also going to have some boat building activities on the shore.
Yeah.
And so each of the communities, Newark and Lyons, are planning some events to go along with that. So people can check in with us later, either on waynehistory.org or with waynecountytourism.com. And this will be a fun time for people, really. And this whole year, we're kind of focusing on the kind of conversation we had today, as rambled as it was and sort of winding its way around, kind of like the canal does. All of it, though, points back to this amazing infrastructure and man-made control of nature, if you will, control of water, so that communities could thrive and businesses could thrive and the country could grow. And it's been interesting to hear about all of the different aspects that go into it. And, I wanted to mention that one of the other activities that's going to be taking place this year is the Wayne County Historian's Office is going to be doing a geocache program along all of the communities in Wayne County. And so there'll be a geocache where you can collect stickers and information. And we're also going to be featuring the information about the canal at the Wayne County Fair. And so that's just a handful of things that are happening.
And we have each month something from each village.
That's
in
right.
regard to the canal and how it was impacted or how it impacted the community.
That's right. And so these articles are being written by local historians, and they're going to be in the Finger Lakes Times and the Wayne County Times. So yeah, it's definitely the year of the canal. So we're capturing the canal here in Wayne County. Bob, I want to thank you again for spending so much time with me today and chatting about all this stuff.
Good to do it.
Thank you all for listening, and we will see you and hear from you again as we discover more things to talk about as we unlock Wayne County.
The only way you can truly appreciate the Erie Canal is by taking a boat ride in August. That's for sure. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Unlock Wayne County. For more information on the events and exhibits featured in this podcast, please visit us at waynehistory.org. We hope to see you at the Museum of Wayne County History.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Unlock Wayne County, where we explore local history and happenings around the county. Join us next time as we continue this conversation with key people in Wayne County who will help open the doors of the past and provide great insight into the future. Unlock Wayne County is produced by Wayne County Historical Society, edited and mastered by Beck Photo and Video, with music provided by, permission from, the Topaz Volunteer Fife and Drum Corps of Macedon, New York. Until next time, we hope you unlock your appreciation for the variety of history and happenings in Wayne County, New York.